Now to Newspoll in The Australian today, where they have picked apart some interesting figures comparing Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton. Now, I should make the point that when you start to mine right down into this data, I mean, the numbers become very small. So the data also suggests voters see the opposition leader as a stronger and more decisive leader who understands the major issues facing Australians. That's Peter Dutton. But it's not all good news for the opposition leader. The pollsters also found that the Prime Minister was seen to be, by the people who responded, more caring and likeable, and labelled the Liberal leader more arrogant. Let's bring in National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie to help us break down the day's news and look at those figures. Just before we get into that, great to see you again. The softness of the courts and magistrates and the inability of police to control suburbs at night where 13-year-olds are breaking into houses. Do we have a law and order problem in this country?
Oh, it doesn't matter. I think you ran through the rap sheet quite well in your opening remarks, Steve. From Alice Springs to Townsville, right throughout this country, there is a sense of lawlessness in our regional capitals and suburban streets. And I think it is issues more culturally wider than just police officers being able to utilise the full force of the law and to be on the ground in those areas. We know that a lot of police forces across different states have been wound back under Labor, and they've had their scope of practice, shall we say, really curtailed. But it's also community leaders, parents, teachers and the like that all need to make sure that young people understand that in a civil society like ours, there are expected behavioural norms, and that it's up to all of us to make sure that young people are raised in a way that they don't turn to drug and alcohol in a way that they are, and see the violence that's occurring on our streets.
I'm pretty sure when you and I were 12 and 13, which in my case was a very long time ago, my mother and father would know where I was and I wouldn't be out roaming the streets.
Well, we roamed the streets, Steve, but only during daylight hours. We were home for dinner. And I think that's there's been huge cultural shifts, and I do think that our police forces need to be better equipped to deal with what we're seeing as a huge surge in youth crime.
Let's drill down into that Newspoll. I think you'd accept my point, wouldn't you, Senator, that when you start to distill down to questions like who's more arrogant, the numbers are pretty small to make a definitive assessment of whether that's in fact right or not.
Well, I think with all polling, you've got to use appropriate methodologies to understand the data. But I think what Newspoll was getting to in the analysis today was that you have, before the Australian public at the next election, two very different men. One who is decisive, who seeks to act when required, who is also compassionate, that didn't come through the data, in Peter Dutton, who's very experienced. And you have Anthony Albanese, who's likeable, likes to spin the discs. Maybe Australians would like to have a beer with him. But is he the man, and are they the characteristics that our country needs at this time? And when you look at the geopolitical risks currently, not just in our own region, but across the globe, when you look at the economic issues our country is facing, Australians are rightfully asking, I think, and Newspoll reflects this, which man is better suited to these times? And I think that's going to be the question they'll be asking heading to the polls in 18 months' time.
Yeah, I don't want a nice man or woman as Prime Minister. I want a leader.
Correct. It's not a beauty pageant, mate, is it? So you want somebody that is going to take decisive action where required, and you want somebody that has a compassionate heart. Now, I've worked in the leadership group with Peter Dutton since 2017, and he's an incredibly compassionate man, a side of himself that not a lot of Australians get to see because of the type of roles he's had to have when we're in government. But you will find no greater threat to pedophiles than Peter Dutton. He's an incredibly compassionate man, but he's also a man of action. And I think that's where the real differential with the current Prime Minister is you've got a very weak leadership style in Anthony Albanese. He and his ministers run away from making the tough decisions at every juncture, and I think Australians are rightfully waking up to that.